In introducing the Honourable Bill Johnston, Bill is the West Australia's Minister for Mines and Petroleum, Energy and Industrial Relations.
Well, thanks, Bill, for inviting me to speak and giving me the opportunity to join this large crowd at this important conference. And I too begin by acknowledging that we meet on the traditional lands of the Noongar people, and I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. It's always good to see such a large response to Pay Dirt's events, and I know that people get much out of these conferences. And it does show the strength of the nickel sector at the moment. Just take as an aside that the first time I ever went to a mine was in 1998 when I was Assistant State Secretary of the Labor Party, and I went to a WMC mine in Kambalda, and I was lucky enough to go underground there. So my first introduction to mining was in fact in a nickel mine. So whilst I still don't know anything about mining, at least I got to be introduced to the nickel sector. Because in 2020 we've continued to see nickel in Western Australia respond to rising demands because of batteries and the electrification of the global energy system. Rising demand, along with Western Australia's competitive advantages, mean we have a significant role to play in growing nickel supply for the broader battery and electrification agenda. These advantages include the existence of established and expanding high-quality resources, an emerging battery minerals processing sector, and strong industry regulation and established trade relationships. And I want to particularly congratulate BHP Nickel West on the opening of their nickel sulphate plant in Kwinana, which shows what we can do here in Western Australia in downstream processing. We're taking processed nickel and turning it into a chemical product for the use in the battery industry. And we hope to see other people follow down the same pathway in the future as well. And of course, we also know that increasing green agenda is focusing on the inputs into the mining sector. And so again, I want to note BHP and their efforts to use green energy. And they're now using the Ryzen Energy Merredin solar farm to cover up to 50% of the electricity use in Kwinana and reduce their Scope 2 emissions from the Kalgoorlie nickel smelter by 30%. BHP Nickel West are also deploying large solar farm and battery storage systems around Mount Keith and Leinster operations, to reducing their carbon emissions by 12%. And we know that there's many new opportunities in that space, and the Government of Western Australia particularly wants to work with the mid-caps and juniors on the decarbonisation agenda. Energy Policy WA, which also answers to me, is now establishing a small unit to engage with junior and mid-cap mining companies to examine the opportunities for renewable energy. We all know that there's a global mega trend happening in decarbonisation, and that is impacting the Western Australian mining industry, and the Government of Western Australia wants to work cooperatively with industry to see a better outcome on carbon emissions here in Western Australia. The last couple of years we've seen some really encouraging signs of increased demand for nickel across the globe. And we know that that's driving up production here in Western Australia. We saw a 3% growth in 2019 to 153,000 tonnes of supply from Western Australia, and last year a further increase of 8% to 165,000 tonnes. We know that that increased volume combined with solid prices have seen the value of nickel exports in Western Australia rise to $3.3 billion, the highest value of exports from Western Australia of nickel since 2014. And the government's very pleased that there was $74 million in royalties paid. But most importantly, we also want to note the 7,500 jobs in the nickel sector. I always make the point that whilst Western Australia will continue to be an iron ore dominated economy, it's actually in the other metals that you see even more jobs. For every dollar investment into the nickel industry, we see a greater return for jobs in Western Australia. That's one of the reasons that I personally pay such careful attention to what's happening in the nickel sector. And that's why we continue to want to support the growth of the nickel sector in this state. And there were a couple of good initiatives in this year's budget that I want to let you know about. The first is that we've increased the funding for the Exploration Incentive Scheme from $10 million a year to $12.5 million a year. Half of that money goes to pre-competitive geoscience acquisition, and the second half is made available for co-funded drilling projects. And I hope that you'll all take advantage of that. Next, we've also spending $120 million across 5 different agencies to see increased resources and new procedures to reduce approvals timelines. In addition, we're investing $10.3 million in the geoscience data transformation strategy, which will unlock all of our analogue data held by the Geological Survey of Western Australia to make it available digitally online for AI and other modern applications. And what the department, I'm very excited about this. I might not sound it, but I am. The point here is that 2/3 of the data held by the department is currently not available in digital format. So this $10.3 million investment will triple the amount of pre-competitive data available for mining companies to use to target for their projects. And every time I go to a new project, I'm always impressed at how people have taken that pre-competitive data and made their targets. And it's extraordinary the number of times I've been somewhere to see a project that found the ore body with their first drill hole. And, I hope you have the same success. So it just shows you that we're also investing in the Future Battery Industry Cooperative Research Centre and some of the wonderful work that's being done there. And it all fits together under our Future Battery Industry and Critical Metals Strategy. That was launched in 2019 and updated again last year. We have a deep commitment to seeing us make the most out of our natural resources here in Western Australia in this space. And I want to just on that topic complete that conversation by pointing out that we have a $13.2 million incentive package for a precursor chemical factory or a PCAM manufacturer to move here to Western Australia. And if you know somebody in that space, get them to come and talk to us. So the last 18 months has been an extraordinary time with the global pandemic. And we can look around the world and see the impact that it's had on other mining and resource jurisdictions. But I want to thank everybody in the sector for working so closely with your workforce and with the government in keeping Western Australia safe and strong. That's been a very important element in keeping Western Australia at the forefront of investors' minds, the fact that we've been able to keep our industry operating over the last 18 months. And we're sure that now that security of supply gives us a good basis to continue to invest and develop more projects into the future. I'm really looking forward to the success of this conference and the rollout of new announcements and projects. I want to thank the organisers for giving me the opportunity to come along, and I hope that we can see even more investment, more jobs and more profit for investors from the nickel industry here in Western Australia. Thank you all very much.
Thank you for the address, Minister. You mentioned opportunities for downstream processing and looking for investors. Obviously, there's a lot of other jurisdictions and economies looking towards downstream processing. I'm thinking of our neighbours, Indonesia in particular, is really advancing in that area. Should we see Indonesia and other Asian jurisdictions as competitors in that downstream opportunity, or is there room for partnerships in that sort of space?
Oh, look, I think there's definitely room for partnerships. The good news about the BHP Nickel West nickel sulphate plant is that it shows that we are now a genuine player in the downstream processing industry for batteries. It shows that Australian technology can solve the problems of producing product to spec for global demand. And I'm sure that there are going to be other investors, and of course the government's talking to some, into that nickel processing stage. I mean, Indonesia is clearly a logical place for downstream processing because they have the raw material and they have a large automotive industry, which I'm sure will be electrifying itself. The good news is there's a lot of opportunity for partnership, firstly in technology, but secondly, because even though they have a lot of nickel, they don't have lithium, so there's clearly our emerging lithium hydroxide providers and cobalt providers are an opportunity to partner with Indonesian industry. But the good news is that global demand is going to grow so fast. There's going to be room for many alternative suppliers. And I think that having a strong tier one jurisdiction like Australia, like Western Australia, where you can have a clear understanding of ESG achievements, that will have a strong role to play in a future industry. And I just want to finish on the comment about China, that China is clearly the dominant player in the battery industry space, and we would expect that they would continue to be so. We're not saying that we should be replacing China. We're just saying that that additional demand we can grow alongside China, and for the users of batteries, it gives them an alternative logistics pathway. And the COVID period has demonstrated that you don't want to have all your logistics go through one location. And so Australia, we think, can play a strong role in a resilient logistics pathway globally. Further question?
Thanks, Minister. I just, from a community perspective, it's really interesting. The industry is moving so quickly. So James Trail from Sheriff Coolgardie, we've been lucky enough that the state government and particularly Mincor with all of their work that they've been doing has been taking the community along the journey. So it's a real challenge for us at the moment because everything's moving so quickly. It's hard enough for all of the people in this room. So do you think there's an opportunity to continue, or that conversation to be really important and better from the mining industry and things, an opportunity to work with local governments and also obviously with approvals and that sort of thing? We've got a responsibility to the community but also to industry. So I'd just be interested in your comments on that, Minister. Thank you.
Sure. Just as a disclosure, my wife comes from Coolgardie, believe it or not, and so I need to just say something nice about the town of Coolgardie, otherwise I get into trouble. Look, it's great that the Shire of Coolgardie is working well with its local investors and the nickel companies in the area. Generally speaking, so far as I'm aware, have a pretty good relationship with the town, and the opportunity for infrastructure is obviously benefit to both sides, and so it's good to see that strong relationship. For those councils that don't see these things as partnership, then I think they will get a benefit out of the mining sector if they take that type of approach. I know there are some times councils can miss the key issues in projects that there's challenges, but there's also benefits, and you need to have a capacity to respond quickly to investors so that they can get what they need out of the project and get it into production. The faster it's into production, the better it is for everybody. So like the government, we do try and work with investors, and we'd encourage local governments to do the same. Like the state government, the local governments don't always get things right, but if you come to the spirit of wanting to work together, you're going to get a better outcome.